evening. I'd like to welcome you and call to order the October 24th Port Orchard City Council regular meeting. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Just, I don't know if you got the email this evening, late this evening. We are going to have an executive session right after the meeting this evening, so set that expectation early. So no action to be taken afterwards. So we have a lengthy agenda. Is there a motion for any amendments to the agenda or an approval of the agenda this evening?
I'd move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. The discussion of the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We are to our first citizen comment period. Anyone wishing to comment on anything on the agenda? Jerry?
Hello. I talked with Ms. Ashby before the starting of this, but I am beginning to feel that a lot is being done in committee, and then you are ready to vote on it here, and it's never coming to this meeting to have some discussion before the vote. And here's one that I've never heard anything mentioned here for the city council. There was one maybe dealing with your compensations and things like that. You're not looking real like things are transparent. And I know that Ms. Lucarelli brought up when she felt this happen earlier this year that she came back from either a vacation or some meeting that she had been to, and you were voting on something because it had been discussed in committee by two committees. I really think that before it's put up for a vote, it needs to come to this council and be discussed publicly, and then you vote on it at the next meeting. Because I come to all of these meetings and I'm beginning to feel like I'm way out in left field and don't know a darn thing that's happening here in this council. You're becoming very untransparent. Thank you.
I think I can address it if you'd like me to.
Yeah, please.
Jerry, all of these items here that are related to the code were actually, they were at a work study. And we're bringing them forward individually because they're individual segments of our code, and they're related to the changes related to being from a second-class city to a code city. In particular, the council's compensation isn't being changed. It's just reworded into modern code. So, but sure.
Could you come to the,
Yeah.
can we catch
I
on
assure you, Jerry, that all of those code sections of code, Ms. Cates brought those to a work study about a month ago.
Well, but I think the only work study I've missed was when I went on a vacation to Solduck, and I missed one Tuesday work study.
Must have been that one.
But still, when you look here, there are very few people. This should be done in a council meeting for the people that watch your videos so they can see it before it comes up for a vote, so that they have an opportunity, if it's something that bothers them, to come to a meeting and say something. And a lot of people don't watch they don't watch anything hardly, so, but it's just the whole point that it needs to be discussed here before it's voted on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your comment. Anyone else wishing to comment on anything on this evening's agenda? Yes, Mr. Whittleton?
Nick Whittleton. I got three concerns. One, the city council shall hold a minimum of one meeting per month. And currently, the council's compensation is based on $500 per meeting with 2 meetings a month. So now a minimum of 1 meeting a month and $1,000 a month compensation. To me, that's doubling the salary. You're cutting the work in half, and doubling the salary. The other is the hotel motel funding allocations, $6,300 for basically Sunday service only on the ferry, because Saturday, that should be a, what do you call it, a connecting route. Either that or the fancy ferry to Seattle provides no service whatsoever to the citizens of Port Orchard.
Thank you for your comment. Would anybody else like to comment this evening on items on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to we don't have any presentations this evening, consent agenda. Publish a consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Comments or questions on the consent agenda items? All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, consent agenda is approved. No presentations, and we are to our first public hearing. Noah Crocker, our new finance director, is here to talk about the public hearing on the revenue sources and property tax levy current expense budget.
Is this going to boot on here? Oh, there we go. Okay. Good evening, council members, mayor. For the record, my name is Noah Crocker, finance director for the city of Port Orchard.
Noah, could you move that microphone just a little bit up higher? You're tall. There you go.
Is that better?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So tonight we are here to hold a public hearing on revenue and sources as required by RCW 8455-120. In accordance with RCW 8455-120, we are required to hold this public hearing on revenue sources for the general fund in order to set the property tax levy for 2018. We are focusing on the current expense, general fund, and street fund for tonight's discussion as the purpose to review revenues for current expense budget in order to adopt the property tax levy coming forward in a future meeting. Before you on this slide is the current adopted biennial budget for tax revenue only. Again, I want to focus on this is tax revenue only for the biennial budget. This amounts to approximately $18.5 million over the 2-year period. In this slide, we identify three main tax categories. Sales tax at approximately $9.167 million, representing the largest tax source. Property tax at $5.396 million, representing the second largest tax source. And finally, other taxes make up the remaining of the tax sources. In this slide, we provide greater detail on the three main taxing categories budgeted. We identify how much we have allocated by fiscal year and the percentage of the overall tax source each represents. Starting again from our top category, sales tax. Sales tax is the largest source, representing nearly 50% of our biennial budgeted tax revenue. Property tax comes in second, with about 30% of our biennial budgeted tax revenue. And finally, again, we come to that other taxes category, making up the remaining 20%. I want to pause on the other tax category and focus in on the top three revenue generators there. Of the top three, we have the electric tax, telephone tax, and utilities. Those three taxes combined make up the 15% of the remaining 20. So that's why I hit on those three of the other taxing sources. Next slide, we complete the biennial revenue picture by adding in all sources of funding. What you'll notice here is that these other revenue sources are identified in the smaller picture up there, the other smaller pie table, representing $3.45 million. The top three categories of these other revenue sources are intergovernmental at $1.046 million, and these are primarily federal and state grant revenues and motor vehicle fuel taxes. Charges for goods and services makes up our second largest in this category pie chart at $911,000. Again, this is primary planning and court fees. And last, we have licenses and permits at $673,000. Again, this is primary business licenses and building permits. This picture, again, completes the overall sources of funding for the biennial budget for the general fund and current expense. On this next slide, we'll take a look at the actuals for 2017 through the end of September. You'll notice that this is measured against the biennial budget. You'll also notice that the total tax revenue we have collected thus far, 34%, is 34% of our biennial total. Of our total taxes, sales tax is at 38%, property tax is at 27%, and then again, the other taxes category is at 36%. Now, being that we're 9 months through a 24-month period, these are actually relatively good percentages, where we'd expect about 37.5% from each category. I will make one note, though, that the property tax, because of its cyclical nature coming in April, October, this is very reasonable to have it at 27%, as we do not have our October taxes in yet. Focusing on the other revenue category, I just want to point out on a couple highlights. License and permits is trending well at 53% of our biennial budget. Miscellaneous revenue is actually at 83% of our budget. So a very high percentage, and when we dug in a little deeper on the details, we found that our monthly leases are higher than expected at $73,000, and our daily parking passes are higher than we expected at roughly $61,000. The other major miscellaneous category that bumps up that percentage is transfers in, so miscellaneous revenues, interest, and transfers in. One low point I want to point out here is the fines and fortunes are less than we would have expected at this time. So they're roughly at 29% of our budget, so that's just something for us to keep an eye on as we move forward throughout the biennial year. But overall, I want to make the statement that our revenues are on track with our biennial budget. Next, we'll come to property tax history table here. This table provides the historic property tax data and the proposed 2018 tax levy to come before council November 14th. In the 2018 proposed tax levy, we identified an amount needed of $2.8 million. It's important to remember that Washington State has one of the most complex property tax methodologies in the nation. Washington State has a budget-based system on property taxation. This means, as part of the budget process, the city is establishing the amount of property tax revenue needed to fund the budget. That amount needed to fund the budget is called the levy. The city establishes the levy amount, and then the county will calculate the levy rate required to raise the amount of revenue once all the other taxing districts submit their levy amounts. The city will certify to the county by November 30th, of which we'll know what the levy rates are. Again, for 2018, we have identified a total of $2.8 million levy needed. And I did make a little footnote there that, again, both the levy amount and the levy rate are subject to change depending on the outcome of this year's election due to the library. And one other factor I put in state utilities, which we'll come to the next slide, or the future slide. So this slide also is another way of depicting property tax collection history. Again, you see we've had some strong growth in property tax collections. Now this slide is a breakdown that compares 2017 property tax against 2018. What we see here is the $2.699 million was levied in 2017. Actually, let me start over. I want to detail out the property tax levy for 2018. So if you start in the far right column under 2018, I'll kind of walk down these numbers to make sure they make sense. 2.699 million was levied in 2017. In 2018, we can collect an additional 23,000, but at this point, we will hit our lid, our maximum levy amount. We then can add in our new construction to our tax collections. We're not factoring anything for annexations. Nothing was annexed in 2018. And I come back to the state utilities, as currently we have a placeholder of $10,000. Now again, this is just an estimated value. You see in 2017 it was 0. So if it comes back that it is 0, we do not get to collect that. But if there does come back to be a value there, I want to make sure that we do capture that. So talking and working with the county treasurer's office, they suggested, a lot of entities do this. They put in a placeholder, not knowing we don't have the actual data yet, but once the data comes in, it will adjust our levy amount. So one way or the other, we'll either capture it or it will be reduced. And then lastly, we are required to, by state statute, to add in all our refunds. And that's at roughly $36,000, which represents monies that were paid out to property owners who went through a dispute process and were awarded a reduction in their AV and were rewarded a refund. So we're required to levy that refund amount as a part of our next year's levy. Oops, keep in this button. So that brings us to the total of 2.8 million. Again, this is subject to change based on the library lift coming forth this election. And we have some rough estimates of what that impact would be to this levy. We're projecting $80,000 to $100,000 reduction if the library lift passes. I mean, if that's the case, we're really talking about having a 2018 levy at about the same amount as our 2017 levy, right about that $2.7 million. So more to come once we know the election results. So equally important, or I'd say even a little more important, if you looked at and memorized the first slide, that sales tax is our #1 generator. When we take a look at sales tax, this slide compares actual to an estimated by fiscal year. So here I've kind of transitioned to not showing it on a biennial basis, but looking at it on a fiscal year basis. 2017 shows that we are on track. Through 3 quarters, we have collected 77% of what we estimated. So sales tax is on track, and we have experienced solid growth in actual sales tax since 2014. Christmas. Okay. This slide gives us a little more breakdown by month, by year, from 14 through 17. On the far right column, we're showing some annual growth rates, again comparing 17 to 16 by month. What I want to point out here is that as we discuss this, when you compare the first 3 quarters of 2016 against the first 3 quarters of 2017, because that's the actual data we have year to date, our growth rate is at roughly 3%, which is solid, it's good. When I looked at 2015, 2016 growth rate comparison, during that period of time, the sales tax growth rate was roughly 10%. So we have seen a slowdown in sales tax growth compared to the prior period. But still solid, still growing, and still positive. The other important thing to mention is that sales tax revenue is delayed and does not show up in the month of sales activity. I mean, there's a 2-month delay before receiving the sales tax revenue. And you can see this in February as a prime example, where our sales tax dollars are much larger than any other month. And that's really due to December sales taxes activity. We display the sales tax history on this graph, as we understand that people tend to be visual learners, so we want to display the data a little differently. It's showing you the same thing. We have solid sales tax growth, and the only month we observe a dip in sales tax revenue for 2017 is in June. In June 2017 was actually lower than 2016. Now, this slide is representing all revenues for the general and current expense fund. This line graph makes it quite evident and noticeable about the impact of property tax revenue. As you see, that comes in April and October. We have these sharp spikes in our cash flows. Again, I want to make the comment that overall the city is on track with the revenues. And that concludes my remarks for tonight. Any questions?
Councilmember Donald?
Noah, walk me through this on the general fund revenues on utilities. I noticed in 2017, natural gas is 62, in 2018, it's 157, it's about 2.5 times as much. What slide are you on?
It's because we passed a natural gas tax increase.
We did, okay. Yeah, why is it?
And put it on the same percentage as electricity 1 year ago.
And on, let me finish, and on page 5, with the pie chart, it's 174,000. You just for my sake, could you clear that up for me?
It's TV cable.
157,500 on the spreadsheet, and it's 174.
No, I think these are not straight across here.
Right,
This
it's color code.
219 goes to natural gas. Do it by color. TV cable.
Yeah, the color is a little tricky here. The 174 you're referring to is the
Oh, is
TV
that what it is?
cable.
look kinda
gray.
Yeah.
Well, in my black and white copy, they're all gray.
I was counting
Yeah, you were,
counterclockwise.
and that's just right across from there, but it's,
Yeah,
see,
it's
the
the 219.
219 is down here. And the 174
Okay, gotcha.
is
All
over
right, good.
there. Yeah.
Thanks, Noah.
Thank you.
This pie graph is biennial budget, not annual budget. So that's why that number didn't. Other questions for Noah?
But I just, going back to the sales tax, and that we had been experiencing, you had indicated in the last couple of years, a 10% growth.
Correct.
And now we're down at a 3% growth, which we feel is still good.
Still good, yeah.
But do we have any ideas as to why the sales tax may be down? Have we looked at what particular sectors that may be?
I haven't.
No,
I haven't. That's something I could try to look into if you're curious.
I don't want to take any time away from anyone who's doing work they need to do, but it would just be interesting to me to see if that's across all sectors or if it's in a particular sector.
I know as the county has been going through their budget process, their sales tax revenue is actually down.
Yeah.
And ours is still positive. I think part of that is attributed to online sales coming to the residents versus people shopping as much in the box store as they did traditionally.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's something that we're going to need to address at some point. I know we've talked about this at finance before. You know, is people's shopping habits are changing, and how do we adapt to that?
What's interesting is that the transit is a countywide tax and our sales tax is up. And I was trying to figure out, well, why is ours up and the county isn't? And the only thing I can come up with is that the transit includes sales in the cities where the counties doesn't. So the cities must be what is having a stronger sales tax revenue than the unincorporated part of the county if the county is down.
Part of that is construction sales taxes won't be collected until next year on some of those bigger projects.
Could
And we'll
be.
see a jump.
True. Okay. You guys back on track here. Any more questions for Noah? Yes.
Just
Mr.
a quick
Mr.
question
Nino?
on slide 14. There's a spike in between, for 2016, in between the first half of property and second half. And I was just curious what that 300,000 might represent.
Last year you're referring to?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
2016, yeah.
You know, I don't know, but I'll circle it and I'll come back to you with the answer.
Somebody didn't pay when they should have, probably, in the first half. Other Other questions from Noah?
We have
Presentation.
Large that's sold during that period of time, don't you have to pay the property tax when you purchase a large?
Well, I don't think it would be REIT, but if
Not REIT.
somebody were delayed, they do collect taxes on the sale, particularly if somebody were behind on their taxes.
Right. So if we had a sale and you were behind on your taxes, you would be required at the sale to bring it current. Yeah, that is true. And with the economy improving too, I think there's fewer and fewer people delinquent on things of that nature too. We are on to our second public hearing of the evening. Okay, okay, that's right. So it's time I'll open the public hearing on the revenue sources and property tax levy. Is anybody wishing to testify on the revenue sources and property taxes? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you for that point of order, Brandy. For our second public hearing of the evening, a public hearing on vacating a portion of right-of-way commonly known as Rockwell Avenue. Clerk Reinerson.
Mayor, Council. So the City of Port Orchard City Council is the petitioner and submitted a petition to vacate a portion of the city right-of-way, commonly known as Rockwell Avenue. It's the southwest corner of Lot 12, Block 15, First Addition to Sydney. The City Council made its own motion and adopted Resolution 54-17 at the September 26, 2017 council meeting, declaring that the notice for a public hearing to vacate the city right-of-way as required by Port Orchard Municipal Code, Chapter 12.08.010, subsection 3, should be given. The public hearing was set for October 24th, 2017. On October 3rd, 2017, the petitioner, the City of Port Orchard staff, posted the required public notice, including a copy of the Resolution 54-17 in 3 public places: 1 at the City Hall Bulletin Board, 2 at the Kitsap County Administrative Buildings Bulletin Board, and 3 at the Port Orchard Library Bulletin Board. In addition, notification was mailed to all abutting property owners, notifying them that the petition and the public hearing. These actions met the required posting and notice requirements as outlined in RCW 35.79.020 and Port Orchard Municipal Code 12.08.020. As of today, staff has not received any written objections to this proposed vacation. Pursuant to RCW 35.79.020 and Port Orchard Municipal Code 12.08.030, subsection 1, the council is prohibited from proceeding with the public hearing if 50% of the abutting property owners filed a written objection to the proposed vacation to the city clerk prior to the hearing. Therefore, no written objections, the council shall proceed with the public hearing. Staff recommends the mayor open the public hearing to take public testimony on the petition to vacate a portion of city right-of-way commonly known as Rockwell Avenue. And I'll go ahead and place a picture of the subject property.
So the 50% neighbor is the city. It's the Pocket Park property that we've bought. And a point of clarification, this is also business item 7A. You have an updated staff report in front of you. The initial staff report, since the city was the petitioner, we had the option of giving the property away, and I don't believe that was the council's intent or the property owner's expectation. We purchased a portion of their property for our pathway. They're purchasing which is the next action item, the Bay Street right-of-way, and they're expecting to purchase this section of the unopened right-of-way at the end of Rockwell. So just a clarification there. So other questions before I open the public hearing on this matter? Okay, I will, at this point, open the public hearing on vacating a portion of city right-of-way commonly known as Rockwell Avenue. Is anyone wishing to testify on this matter? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. We are to our third and final public hearing this evening, a public hearing on the vacation of a portion of the city right-of-way commonly known as Bay Street.
So the city received a second petition by Ms. Ann Schnitzler on behalf of Marley Apartments, submitted a petition to vacate a portion of the right-of-way commonly known as Bay Street, Lot 14, Block 15, First Edition to Sydney. The petitioner owns 50% of the abutting property to the proposed vacation area. The adjacent property owner is the City of Port Orchard via city right-of-way and represents the other abutting property owner on the petition. These property owners represent more than 2/3 of the abutting property as required by RCW 35.79.010 and Port Orchard Municipal Code 12.08.010. On September 26, 2017, the council adopted resolution number 53-17, setting a public hearing on this petition to vacate a portion of the city's right-of-way. On October 3, 2017, the city posted the required public notice and placed a copy of the adopted resolution in 3 public places. The first one, City Hall Bulletin Board. Second, Kitsap County Administrative Building Bulletin Board. And 3, the Port Orchard Library Bulletin Board. Since the petitioner and the city are the adjacent property owners, was no need to notify any abutting property owners of the petition and the public hearing. These actions met the required posting and noticing requirements as outlined in RCW 35.79.020 and Port Orchard Municipal Code 12.08.020. As of today, staff has not received any written objections to this proposed vacation. Pursuant to RCW 35.79.020 and Port Orchard Municipal Code 12.08.030, subsection 1, the council is prohibited from proceeding with the public hearing if 50% of the abutting property owners filed written objections to the proposed vacation prior to the time of the hearing. Therefore, no written objections, and the council shall proceed with the public hearing.
Okay. So this one is the sliver of land that on Long Bay Street, when the Marley Apartments was built, it was built on the edge of the city's right-of-way. And part of our pathway project, we have to remedy all of the encroachments in the right-of-way. So with that, I will open public hearing on this matter, which is a public hearing on vacating a portion of city right-of-way commonly known as Bay Street.
And I did fail to mention, I do believe the petitioner is in the audience if she would like to comment, or if the council has any questions.
Okay. Anyone wishing to testify? Mr. Dorsey, are you testifying?
I'm testifying. I'm providing additional clarification. So on the previous vacation of Rockwell, that was a strictly city issue. It's not associated with the actual Bay Street pedestrian pathway project. This project, even though we, as you mentioned, we're required to resolve any encroachments along the pathway, the State Department of Transportation sent us a letter basically stating that they would not be getting involved in this. This would be a city process, but upon completion, it will be part of the certification review for right-of-way. But this is a, they basically granted our right-of-way vacation process to move forward with. So I wanted to provide that clarification.
Okay. Anyone wishing to testify on this vacation? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Okay, we are on to our business items. The first is business item 7A, adoption of an ordinance approving the petition to vacate a portion of city right-of-way commonly known as Rockwell Avenue. Clerk Reinerson.
Yes. So earlier this evening, a public hearing was held to take testimony on whether the city council should vacate a portion of the city right-of-way commonly known as Rockwell Avenue. Staff has determined the following with regard to the proposed street vacation. The area to be vacated is the northerly 6 foot measured from the ordinary high water mark.
60 feet.
60 feet, sorry. Measured south from the ordinary high water mark of the remaining westerly half of the Rockwell right-of-way. The Marley Apartments were built in 1960 to 1961 and used the westerly half of the Rockwell right-of-way for access to their covered parking. It appears that the easterly half of the Rockwell right-of-way was later vacated as a function of the Holiday Inn hotel development, now Comfort Inn, in the 1980s. This action created the resultant situation that the primary use of the remaining Rockwell right-of-way is by the Marley Apartments for vehicular access to the apartment parking. 2, the area in question was originally vacated by the city some time ago and just recently purchased at the appraised fair market value. There are no public utilities or services within the proposed vacation area. The area sought to be vacated is not needed for public travel now or in the foreseeable future, and it will be for private use. The remaining Rockwell right-of-way will be for access to the future Rockwell Waterfront Park parking spaces. The area sought to be vacated is not in any of the city's planning documents, and the proposed vacation area is not needed for any future city use. Based on the report provided to the council, staff recommends approving the street vacation petition as presented, and the fiscal impact has been updated for the council, and upon the approval of the street vacation, the city may require the owners of the property abutting the street to compensate the city in an amount not to exceed the full appraised value of the area vacated, and that's per Port Orchard Municipal Code 12.08.050, subsection 1B. The value of the area to be vacated is based on the value used for the Bay Street vacation. That value is $20 per square foot. The area to be vacated is 1,176 square feet. The estimated amount is $23,520.
Questions or a motion? Mr. Diener?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance, vacating a portion of the city's right-of-way commonly known as Rockwell Avenue as presented.
Motion and a second by Councilmember Kuchardi. Questions or comments about this vacation? Hearing none, you'll be voting to adopt an ordinance vacating a portion of the city's right-of-way commonly known as Rockwell Street as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are on to 7B, adoption of an ordinance approving the petition to vacate a portion of the city right-of-way commonly known as Bay Street. Clerk Reinerson.
Okay. Again, earlier this evening, a public hearing was held to take testimony on whether the city council should vacate a portion of the city right-of-way commonly known as Bay Street. Staff has determined the following with regard to the proposed street vacation: that the area sought to be vacated was dedicated to the city in 1890 as part of the first addition to Sidney Plat. To date, the city has not opened the right-of-way. The city engineer has reviewed the street vacation petition and has indicated the following: the area sought to be vacated is not needed for public travel now or in the foreseeable future. The functionality of the area sought to be vacated for public purposes is non-existent. The area is encroaching into the city's right-of-way. This vacation would clean up an encroachment so that the city can receive the necessary certification from WashDOT for the Bay Street pedestrian pathway. The vacation of the property would not adversely affect any city utilities such as water, sewer, or storm. The city has not included any projects within the proposed vacation area as part of the 6-year road plan, nor has the city scheduled any capital facilities projects on this property. The Community Development Director stated the following: that the vacation of the proposed area does not create potential or actual land uses that are inconsistent with the growth plans and goals for the city. The area has been identified in the city's, the area has not been identified in the city's comprehensive plan. Based on the report provided to the council, staff recommends approving the street vacation as presented.
Ms. Lucarelli.
I move to adopt an ordinance vacating a portion of the city's right-of-way commonly known as Bay Street as presented.
Second.
A second by Councilmember Donlin. Questions or comments?
I would just like to, both the preceding action we just took for Rockwell and the action we're about to take for Bay Street has been discussed at several different meetings and several different work studies. But I wanted to make sure the audience was comfortable with that information, or if they wanted more information for us to have a dialogue before we take our action. We're fine, okay.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, you'll be voting on a motion to approve an ordinance vacating a portion of the city's right-of-way commonly known as Bay Street as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. All right, I think we have all of our easements now, and now we can proceed with right-of-way certification for the pathway, so which is very exciting. It's groundbreaking to come. So we are on to 7C, adoption of an ordinance adopting a new chapter of the Port Orchard Municipal Code 1.06, city classification. Ms. Cates.
Thank you, Your Honor. Council members, on July 21st, 2017, the classification of the city of Port Orchard changed to that of a non-charter
You could
code
just a
city.
little closer, you're just not projecting very well there.
Better?
Better,
Yeah,
there
much
we go,
better.
thank you.
I think I'll start over now that you can hear me. On July 21st, 2017, the classification of the city of Port Orchard changed to that of non-charter code city. Due to this reclassification, certain changes to the Port Orchard Municipal Code are needed. The ordinance before you tonight is to adopt a new Chapter 106, City Classification, into the Port Orchard Municipal Code. This proposed new code section states that the city has adopted the classification of non-charter code city and therefore will hereafter be governed by the optional municipal code, Title 35A RCW, and delineates how these changes will affect certain city processes that are already in place. Staff recommends adoption of an ordinance adopting a new Chapter 106 Port Orchard Municipal Code, City Classification as presented.
Okay. Mr. Diener,
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance to adopt a new chapter 1.06 Port Orchard Municipal Code, City Classification, as presented.
motion
Second.
and a second? Okay. And I know this was all brought to the council as one package. There was probably 10 pages to it. And over the next 3 meetings, we broke it into about a half a dozen different action items because it affects various pieces of our code, and we wanted to take these piece by piece and be very transparent about the process we're going through. So, motion is second. Questions?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I wonder if for the next, this item and the next few items, if it would also be worthwhile for the public to understand what's actually changing. I know that we reference what is going to be happening, but maybe a comparison about what existed before versus what's happening with this might be useful in layman's terms.
Okay. Ms.
Well,
Cates?
For this one, this is a new section. It's modeled after a code section in another jurisdiction that became a code city and wanted to make it clear that this classification had been adopted, and it sets forth exactly when that takes place, so it makes clear, what law is in effect at before and after the reclassification. And it sort of lays out that the optional municipal code, Title 35A RCW, which governs code cities, will now be what the city uses as its governing statutes. It sets forth that the effective date of becoming a non-charter code city is July 21st, 2017. And it talks about when you reclassify, sometimes that affects city council positions, when elections will take place, that sort of thing. So that has been clarified in here, so everybody knows going forward how that will work. And how
Which is no change to what we
no
currently
change.
do. It's just we fall under a new section of the RCW, correct?
Correct. It also outlines what will happen for city council position vacancies, and that's just something that's part of the optional municipal code that we just added to this code section to just make it clear what happens when there are vacancies. And it also states what it states in the optional municipal code, that all existing city laws and regulations that were in place when the city was a second-class city remain in effect unless there's some conflict with the law, which is what a lot of what we're doing with a lot of these changes is that we've either found sections that are referring to RCWs that regulate only second-class cities, or those have been updated, and to the extent we found conflicts with, there weren't very many, but to the extent we found conflicts with the optional municipal code, we made those changes where necessary.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you for the question. Okay, hearing none, we vote. The motion is to adopt an ordinance to adopt a new chapter of our municipal code, 1.06, city classification. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are to the second item, which is 7E, adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code, chapters 2. I skipped one, didn't I? We're at D, I believe, which is adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code, Chapter 2.04, council meetings.
Thank you. So again, on July 21st, 2017, the classification of City Port Orchard changed to the non-charter code city. and certain updates to the Portage Municipal Code are needed. This ordinance regarding Chapter 204, Portage Municipal Code Council Meetings, there are certain proposed amendments to this chapter that incorporate provisions of the optional municipal code relating to certain city council meeting rules and processes that apply to the city now that it has been reclassified as a non-charter code city. It also removes certain provisions that apply only to second-class cities, and it provides other updates and cleanups of this chapter of the code. And I can talk you through what it is now, or wait until the motion has been made.
Okay, I think we will potentially have a motion and then talk about the changes. Yes, Mr. Chang.
I move to adopt an ordinance to amend certain sections of Chapter 2.04 Port Orchard Municipal Code, council meetings as presented.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, and Sharon and I had actually worked on this one together. Probably the major change is that we'll adopt an annual calendar of our meetings, where our prior schedule was very rigid. It does say that we will hold a minimum of one meeting. I can't ever foresee us getting through all of our work in less than 2 meetings a month. We're currently having 3 meetings, 2 of which are a business meeting and 1 is a work study meeting. Next council meeting, I'll bring forward that calendar that I'm proposing for 2018. It'll be similar to what we did this year, is what I'm going to propose, that we not have a work study in August. And the major shift will be that we have 2 business meetings back to back in December, which would be the first 2, the second and third Tuesdays, and then avoid the Christmas holiday week, which most people are out of town anyway. The other idea that I'm going to float is in August we sandwich the 2 business meetings together so that we have a longer summer break in there, so that it's 2 business meetings in 2 weeks versus a business meeting, a week off, and a business meeting. But that's to come next week. Other questions? Yes, Mr. Diener?
So one thing that caught my eye was on page 89,
Okay.
under section 4, where it begins the underline, for deputy mayor. That was something that I hadn't heard of before.
Title that we've historically used, but many other cities do.
Okay.
And I caught that today too.
Right, it's something that's in the RCW as an option if the city at some point wants to adopt a deputy mayor position and use that instead of a mayor pro tem.
Because it says or.
So you would have a pro tem or a deputy?
Correct.
Okay.
I believe how it would work, you would have yeah. When I've gone to, typically when I go to conferences, many times I'll hear someone introduce themselves as the deputy mayor.
Or you could have a situation where you have a mayor and a deputy mayor and neither one of them can be at the meeting, then you'd have to have a mayor pro tem fill in for that meeting.
Or that night.
I presume that'll be something then we'll talk about when it's next approved.
Until you say somebody's the deputy mayor,
Right.
every January we nominate someone from the body be the mayor pro tem. You could choose to change the title of that position if you.
And just
So is
add,
it anything more than just changing the title?
It's correct.
just to add one more comment, I think one of the biggest reasons our council discussed all of this was to enable us to conduct business where, for example, when we do our work studies, if we had something come up, we needed to conduct business, it provides us the flexibility to do so. So it certainly wasn't to reduce the number of meetings, it was actually to increase the number of meetings where we could actually conduct business.
That number was arbitrary.
Right.
It could be 2 or 3 or 5.
Correct.
But I find it hard to believe we would be able to get all of our work done in less than 2 meetings a month.
Correct.
The optional municipal code only requires 1 meeting per month. It says all city councils will at least hold 1, so we put that in as at least that. But as the mayor said, it's probably never going to be just 1.
Questions? Comment? Okay, we'll be voting on adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code 2.04, council meetings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We are to item E, which is adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code Chapters 2.04, appointive officers. Ms. Gates.
Thank you. Again, July 21st, 2017, the classification of the city of Port Orchard changed to that of non-charter code city. As a result, certain changes to the Port Orchard Municipal Code are needed. This ordinance regarding Chapter 2.08 is to amend certain sections of that chapter to incorporate provisions of the optional municipal code, Title 35A RCW, relating to certain rules and processes that apply to the appointment of appointive officers that apply to the city now that it's been reclassified as a non-charter code city. It also removes provisions that apply to second-class cities and provides other updates and cleanups of this chapter of the code.
Mr. Kuchardi.
I move to adopt an ordinance amending certain sections of Chapter 2.08 Port Orchard Municipal Code, appointive officers as presented.
Second?
Motion and a second. Go ahead.
Oh, I did have a question. It's at the top of page 97. It's in the middle of the underlining, and the sentence reads, "Confirmation by the city council of appointments of officers shall be required only when the city council, by ordinance, provides for confirmation of such appointments." I was wondering if that's, how that is a change from what we currently do, our current practice.
It is, I don't believe it is a change.
I don't believe it is a change.
Okay.
This wording is specifically from the RCW, just spelling that out, which we didn't have it spelled out before.
And we have an ordinance that spells out the plan, all the boards and commissions. There is one cleanup here, and we've modernized these titles here to, we still have the reference to city engineer, and I don't think that's incorrect. That's not correct.
It was corrected on the final, but not on the red line.
And not on the red, it is correct on the final, okay. And so we've got now a finance director instead of a treasurer. It's Mark is the public works director, and he's also an engineer, and just gives the city more flexibility in the future. Mark ever left the city that I need to come back to you guys for a public works director, but that public works director may or may not be a city engineer. We're gonna employ a city engineer. It just doesn't have to be one and the same. Development director was the city planner previously, and we still have a police chief, a hearing examiner, code enforcement officer, and a municipal judge. So, yes, Mr. Diener?
So on page 96 and 97, we've struck out the removal. It's still allowed, but then procedurally, it's absent from here. And maybe it's because it's covered elsewhere, but it seems like appointments are covered in fair detail, just removal is not.
Removal is not. That is an administrative function, and which that is currently in our code that way.
Okay, sorry, that's what I was
So
doing.
when I appoint someone, I need to bring them before to the city council for confirmation. But removal of a staff member is an administrative function, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Others questions? Okay, hearing none, you're voting on 7E, adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code, Chapters 2.08, appointing of officers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. We are to 7F, which is adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code 2.06, compensation for city council members.
Thank you. Due to the classification of the city of Port Orchard, a non-charter code city, certain changes to Port Orchard Municipal Code Chapter 2.60, compensation for city council members, is required. The proposed amendments to this chapter of the Port Orchard Municipal Code incorporate provisions of the optional municipal code, Title 35A RCW, relating to certain rules and processes that apply to the compensation of city council members, which apply to the city now that it has been reclassified as a non-charter code city, remove provisions that apply to second-class cities, and provide other updates and cleanup of this chapter of the code.
Mr. Diener, or Donald, sorry.
I move to adopt an ordinance to amending certain sections of Chapter 2.60 Port Orchard Municipal Code, compensation of city council members as presented.
Second.
And I bet I'm going to answer your questions. So maybe not, though. Our code previously dealt with council attendance and the council pay being twice monthly. And when former Treasurer Martin and Sharon and I sat down and talked, it was in conflict with the RCWs, that once a council member is elected, we really don't have any latitude whether we pay them or not. There are steps outlined in the RCW on how many meetings you have to miss. There are reasons that you can no longer serve, but once you're elected, it's not discretionary how many meetings you attend and whether or not you get paid. And we just felt it was clearer, simpler, that we put in the code that you're going to be paid $1,000 monthly, and that because that is what you're currently getting paid. And we had a bunch of other things in the code that were in conflict with state statutes. So, did that answer your question?
So in other words, the 500 per regular meeting was in conflict with state code?
That in itself was not, but there wasn't a need for it. We had attendance requirements, and that you could only miss so many meetings previously, and so that was kind of the teeth to it, is you had to attend the meetings to get paid. And the treasurer said, I don't believe legally I could withhold anybody's pay. So it wasn't, it was really kind of toothless, what was in our previous code.
Not only that, but previously council had 2 regular meetings per month, which made sense in the way this is apportioned. But with the addition of work study, we were now having 3. So the question arose in some people's minds, is that an additional meeting that
Right.
should be paid for?
Yeah.
And now with all 3 or 2 or 3 per month.
1, 2, or 3 or 5 meetings a month, your compensation is the
It's
same.
not a, yeah.
It's not an issue.
The other.
Does that mean we get back pay for those periods of time?
No.
Should have been paid for 3 meetings? a month?
No,
Yeah,
I don't think
and
so.
the other thing logistically with it is the city's payroll is every other week. It's not twice a month. And so it was confusing to me to start with when I became a council member, that I wasn't getting paid twice a month. I'm getting paid every other week. And so anyway, I think this is a much cleaner way to present our compensation.
I'm still not certain, and it'd be up to Noah and his staff whether we're gonna pay you once a month or you're gonna still see it bi-weekly. We don't, we can change it however you want it, but, you're right, we have off-cycle pay periods that are just for the council.
Right, and then there's 2 pay cycles a year we don't get anything, and that's whenever, so.
Yeah, it is confusing at times.
It is.
Mr. Diener?
I can tell you that the county's election office sees this as a salaried position at 1,000 a month, because when I was filling out paperwork for the election, I argued with them that we were on a 500 per meeting stipend, and they said no. And we went back and forth, and I was shown wrong with that.
Yes.
All right.
All right, other questions? We'll be voting on adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code, Chapters 2.60, compensation for city council members. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are to item G, which is adoption of an ordinance adopting a new chapter of the Port Orchard Municipal Code, Chapter 3.02, biennial budget. Ms. Cates.
Thank you. On July 21st, 2017, the classification of the city of Port Orchard changed to that of non-charter code city. Due to this reclassification, certain changes to the Port Orchard Municipal Code are needed. The ordinance before you tonight is to adopt a new Chapter 3.02 biennial budget into the Port Orchard Municipal Code. This proposed new code section adopts the biennial budget processes set forth in the optional municipal code Title 35A RCW, which apply to the city now that it has been reclassified as a non-charter code city.
Is there a motion?
I move to adopt an ordinance to adopt a new chapter 3.02 Port Orchard Municipal Code biennial budget as presented.
Second.
In a second, as you know, we're in the second year of, or actually, we're just finishing the first year of our first biennial budget, and this is just codifying it with our new classification of as a code city. We will continue to do biennial budgets. Other questions? Hearing none, we'll be voting on adoption of a new chapter or the code of Port Orchard Municipal Code, Chapter 3.02, biennial budgets. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We are to 7H, adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code, Chapters 9.46, city-owned docks and piers. Ms. Cates.
Thank you. On July 21st, 2017, the classification of the city of Port Orchard changed to that of non-charter code city. Due to this reclassification, certain changes to the Port Orchard Municipal Code are needed. The ordinance before you tonight is to amend certain sections of Chapter 9.46 Port Orchard Municipal Code, city-owned docks and piers. The proposed amendments to this chapter of the Port Orchard Municipal Code incorporate provisions of the optional municipal code, Title 35A RCW, relating to certain rules and processes that apply to abandoned and derelict vessels located at city-owned docks and piers that apply to the city now that it has been reclassified as a non-charter code city. It also removes provisions that apply to second-class cities and provides other updates and cleanup of this chapter of the code.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance to amend certain sections of Chapter 9.46 Port Orchard Municipal Code, city-owned docks and piers as presented.
Second by Councilmember Lucarelli. This one had quite a bit of cleanup in it. Second-class city code versus and what we had, which we just did last year because we had all those problems with the Cal Pier. So just quite a bit of cleanup. Other questions about it? Okay. Be voting on adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code 9.46, city-owned docks and piers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So the next two meetings, we probably have just about as many, about a half a dozen chunks of the code that we'll bring forward. So the agenda looks quite large there too. So on to other matters that aren't related to our code city status. We're to item 7I, approval of change order number 2 to contract number 021-17 with Transpo Group USA Inc. for the 2017 Anderson Hill Old Clifton Roundabout 100% PS&E. Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Your Honor, council members. On February 28, 2017, the Port Orchard City Council approved contract C02117 for the 2017 100% PS&E Anderson Hill Road Southwest Old Clifton Road Roundabout project in the amount not to exceed $49,400. On June 27, 2017, change order number 1 for $5,750 was approved by the City Council for needed right-of-way acquisitions, which was staking of clearing limits and arborist review of remaining tree stand. That's not for the actual acquisitions. It was continued conversation to clarify the area needed to be acquired. And location-specific storm drainage-related geotechnical analysis. In order to apply for future TIB funding, a cultural resources assessment is needed. Change order number 2 attached requests an additional $5,740 to have this task completed. This project is Project 1.5, Chapter 8, Transportation within the Comprehensive Plan. Staff recommends that the City Council authorize the mayor to execute change order number 2 to contract C021-17 with the Transport Group USA Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $5,740, bringing the new contract total to $60,890. Fiscal impact is that $50,000 was allocated within the approved 2017 budget, and a budget amendment from Fund 304 for the additional $5,740. And actually, I don't think there was a budget amendment that approved the previous 5,750 yet. So you'll have a total of 10,890 that will come from either the Bayside Plat Mitigation Fund or the McCormick Transportation Impact Fee Fund to have this work accomplished.
No, I believe that was on the docket for the budget amendments, if I remember correctly.
Well, we do have one of them, so that I was just making a note to verify whether the original change order has already been amended. I didn't believe it had.
It had not.
So that was one we were bringing forward to this, Mark is correct, this would be the second one we'd bring forward as part of that 2017 mid-year review budget amendment.
Is there a motion or questions? Go ahead.
Mr.
Councilmember
Mayor,
Ashby.
I move to approve change order number 2 to contract number C021-17 with Transpo Group USA, Inc. in the amount not to exceed $5,740 to bring the new contract total to $60,890.
Motion and a second. Questions or
Yeah,
comments?
just,
Yes.
just to clarify, this money is not coming out of the general fund. It's coming out of one of the mitigation accounts we have, one of the impact fee accounts we have.
Correct.
Thank you.
And it is not captured yet in the budget amendment, but that's in process.
Yep,
Taken the action yet.
yep.
So motion and a second. Any other questions? Okay, you'll be voting on change order number 2 for the Old Clifton Anderson Hill Roundabout 100% PSNE. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We're to 7J, which is a discussion of Lodging Tax Advisory Committee's recommendation for the 2018 funding allocations. Clerk Reinerson.
So on September 22nd, the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee heard presentations from applicants who requested funds for 2018. And then on October 16, 2017, the committee met to discuss the applications and deliberate to provide the council with a recommendation of the allocation of funds. Staff is looking for direction from the council as to if they want to bring this item forward at the next council meeting for adoption, or to bring this item to the next council work study session for further discussion.
Discussion is yours, and we'd appreciate some direction at the end of your discussion. Member Ashby?
I would just say that I listened to the deliberations of the LTAC meeting on last Monday, I believe it was, and the committee did a very diligent job of reviewing the applications and coming up with their recommendations. They went through a very logical process, and it's not an easy task when you have the number of qualified applicants that they do and the funds they have. So I just want to compliment them for the work they did do. I thought they did a very nice job.
And I did question with Brandy the foot ferry 6,300 versus the 8,000 that was requested. And it's believed that the 6,300 is sufficient to cover the Sunday service and holiday service that Kitsap Transit doesn't cover. The ferry measure does cover the Saturdays and the extended service on the Friday nights and Saturdays. So
The other point to that is we have yet to meet with our partners for the summer extended hours, so we really don't know what, and I know I haven't reviewed the financials from last year. And so anyway, that number is kind of up in the air, and if that's the limit we have, then that's the limit we have.
other questions or comments?
Well, maybe a question for Beck. Is there value then in bringing this to work study?
Unless the rest of council has something that they need. Fred's chair of the committee, he may wish to, I just listened to it.
Okay.
And I had conversation with Clerk Reinerson on it because there were some things that were missing from the minutes that I had anticipated seeing, and she finally had IT get the recording up for us, so I was able to listen to it, and all of my questions were answered at that point.
I don't know that there's a lot of value to taking it to work study. You can either accept or reject
Yeah.
the recommendation. We don't, the council doesn't get to move the dollars around. You either accept their recommendation or you remand it back to the committee with recommendations on how to modify it.
The only thing I would add is that the committee was tasked with allocating 91,226,000 in requests, and I feel they did go through it. It's not like they gave everybody 72%. It wasn't quite that methodical, but the end result does look like everyone got some of what they wanted. There are some things, as Beck alluded to, that that did not happen. First, what did happen is the committee did fully commit to the full funding for Visit Kitsap. That's something that we conveyed to them, and they agreed to that. Something else is they understood some of the concerns that were expressed to them about Fathoms and how Fathoms funds a great portion of their concerts by the bay through the city's lodging tax. So that was reflected, and I think the minutes did a very good job of reflecting that. Thank you for summarizing that. The other item that was in the air was the reserve for applications that may come up after this period. And this was, of course, discussed last at the meeting, but the rationale was that they believe that there may be a fund balance. In other words, everything allocated for this year of 2017 may not actually be spoken for. So that may be some of the funding. They're also hoping that the estimate of 91,000 was conservative and there may be a little more. So if there is a cushion there, that would go to the reserve for unanticipated or people who haven't applied before. They're also a little unsure of when we're expecting those applications, if it's like a monthly thing, and I don't think any of us know, but I think it's a nice thing that we're at least, making a sort of a placeholder that we want to be able to accommodate unanticipated applications.
Other questions? Are you comfortable this coming back to a council meeting for adoption or further discussion? We're all ready to letter O on the next for business items. How about the last meeting in November? Does that push it too far out, or would you like it added to next council meeting?
Part of the budget process, is it not? So whatever meets with Noah's needs.
Noah, do you have a preference on what council meeting this items comes? Would you prefer it sooner versus later?
Well, we were targeting November 14th for all our mid-year review, biennial budgets, amendments, and the property tax, as well as some other items. Because again, we were trying to stay away from the holidays as you get later that month, that 21st meeting. And then again, when we talked about for December, if anything needed to come, we'd target that first meeting rather than the second meeting. So if this does require a budget amendment, I think it shouldn't.
I don't believe
It won't.
does.
I think so.
No.
Okay.
We're just
Allocated.
allocating the funds that were identified in the budget. So it's pretty simple item. We could add it to the 14th.
Yeah.
Would you prefer that be on the agenda on the 14th? So
I
well,
agree.
let's just add it. Okay. So
I can add it to the consent if the council feels comfortable with that as well, to help reduce some of the items on the business
comfortable
items.
with it on the consent agenda?
I am.
Unless we hear something between now and then, we could always pull it off.
You can always pull it off. That's true. Yep, okay. So on the consent agenda, the 14th. That's what I'm hearing. Okay, we are to item K, which is the approval of the October 10th, 2017 council meeting minutes.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of October 10th, 2017.
Second.
And we'll have one abstention. So all in favor of approving the council meeting minutes of October 10th, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, and one abstention from Mr. Clausen. Okay, we are to council committee reports. The Finance Committee.
I didn't bring my notes with me, but help me, committee members.
We basically reviewed what we just reviewed.
Yeah, we
tonight.
reviewed this.
We looked at the
Verbatim.
presentation that we had tonight. We looked at the sales tax receipts, which were good. We did talk very briefly about the method for which we are accounting, whether it's a cash accrual but there's more to come on that. And what else? That was about the extent of it.
Yeah, the sales tax, or the revenue sources is the
Yeah,
primary.
Was the primary focus of the meeting,
Meeting,
so.
yeah. Okay.
And I thought we had scheduled the next finance committee meeting.
We have.
And it says to be determined on the,
Will you look for that?
I'll look for that while you move on to the next committee.
Economic Development and Tourism gives their report.
Yes, and we have not met since our last meeting, and we're scheduled the second Monday of. And Brandy, do you know when the next Roger Brooks is?
I do not believe they're hosting anymore. I think it was just January through October.
Oh, okay. Okay, because I got an email about a presentation, but it's probably not free anymore.
Correct, that's my
Okay.
understanding, but I will look into it just to make sure.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Clausen, you have that date?
I do. The next committee meeting is scheduled for November 21st. It's a Tuesday at 5 PM here at City Hall,
We were going to do it before the council meeting.
before the council meeting.
Yep. Okay, Utility Committee.
Yes, we met, and I would say most of the meeting was spent on a discussion regarding waste management and some of the concerns that have been addressed to the council. We had Laura Moser and Joey Pelleccia from Waste Management there to answer our questions and to steer us in a direction about the possibilities of offering more services to the Port Orchard residents. I wouldn't mind having both of you, Scott and Fred, comment if you have anything to say. The long and short of it is that with our requirement for all of our citizens to subscribe to Waste Management, currently Waste Management is offering as many options as they can to make it economical for all of us. There are people who have been working very hard to try to have a very small footprint, and unfortunately there are not too many options, because it would be very difficult once we start to make exceptions where to cut that off. But it was, I thought, a great discussion. They took quite a lot of time out of their schedules to come and inform us. And for the citizens, I think we have a situation that's as fair as possible. There are quite a few options that citizens can make as far as the size of their containers. And if anyone has questions, these people were willing to answer anything, address any concerns that citizens had. But what we did find is once you start making exceptions, the price pretty much goes up for everyone. And, we were talking about size of garbage containers, and actually a 10-gallon container ends up being more expensive than the regular containers because, again, of the exception. Fred, do you want to add anything about that?
I would say we did learn that there was a once-a-month pickup, which was the 10-gallon container. That might be a minimal for some people. For example, I have the next one up every other week. So that may be an option. And I'm still not completely convinced that we could not make an exception for the gentleman who came in from the county. I do realize, and I heard actually very strong arguments that we should not make any exceptions, but I don't quite agree. I'm not on board with that. I don't have a current solution. They gave some examples of how they thought things may have been handled in Auburn, but as Councilman Diener brought up, one of the issues with making an exception is we'd have to staff for it. So what we're considering is maybe if we wrote the exception in such a way, it may not be such a viable alternative after all.
Well, thank you for your update.
The next meeting will be, we have down November 21st, but I have a feeling is that a Tuesday?
That's a Tuesday.
Okay, should be November 20th, right, Mark? For the next meeting. We had it on our agenda as 21st, but I have a feeling it's the 20th. Yes, so that's just a change to the agenda update. So November 20th here at City Hall, 9:30 a.m.
Okay. Sewer Advisory Committee, have you met?
Our next meeting is January 17th, 6:30 here at City Hall.
Okay. And Land Use.
We did not have a meeting. So we look forward to any ideas for the next meeting, which is scheduled for November 15th at 7:30 a.m. at DCD.
We're working on one for land use. We've learned a lot about our charging stations downtown, and the one that's up at the county campus, that they were placed under, we got them, somebody in the staff bought an electric car and wants to plug it in, and the charging stations don't work. So he's become our resident expert on this matter, and we'll be bringing that to land use. They were installed under a grant provided by the Obama administration. Now there was an agreement that went with those stations that is now expired, and now they want us to pay them for the stations that are on our waterfront. So we're gonna analyze whether that's a good deal or not, or whether we should have different stations in a different agreement, or as Olympia has done, you buy a much less expensive machine and just provide the charging as an economic stimulus to draw people to your community. So we'll bring that forward and let you noodle on that at land use. Lodging tax advisory, I think you just met. If you want to give any more than what we heard.
There are no scheduled meetings. The only other desire I'd say that I heard from the committee is they wish, of course, that we had more lodging in the city limits. I happened to look at the awards for Bremerton, and they have 10 times the amount of lodging tax that we do. They're talking about 800,000. We're talking 91,000.
So are you gonna open a hotel then?
I don't know that I am, but maybe we could ask everyone to do an Airbnb in their bedroom and somehow bring up the lodging. But,
I don't know that we get hotel motel permitting.
we do.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
From
Okay.
Airbnb?
I believe we do. The treasurer could probably confirm or look into that.
I don't think there is.
I don't believe
No,
so.
I believe we do.
But I guess if you volunteered it, we would get it. But Festival of Chimelets and Lights?
Our next meeting is this Monday, October 30th. We had one on the 16th, and mostly we're working out details now, who's going to be doing what.
Okay, and at Councilmembers Ashby's request, we have added the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council to our agenda so that we can talk about that. And I know we have our legislative reception coming up. Is that on November 9th? At McCormick Woods. Hopefully, if you're going to attend, if we passed the deadline for registration of that yet?
No.
Okay, so get a hold of Janine if you want to attend. Since it's in our community, I would love to see as many of us that we could attend that. I know that Nick also prepared since we're on the topic of KRCC, a white paper that's on the dais here before you about the centers discussion that we had at work study. Do we want to dive into that at all now?
Yeah, so the county had prepared its comments and went ahead and submitted those to PSRC, and we were sent an email with those comments that said that KRCC may want to use those as a basis for developing countywide comments on the center strategy. We obviously haven't had a whole lot of time to look at the county comments and study the regional center strategy, but I had my staff do a review of the county's letter and try to figure out which of the concerns expressed by the county would be shared by the city or potentially shared by the city. And then, really what I see from looking at this is that I hear words coming from PSRC staff that is explaining what is written, but I think some of the written text could use additional clarification, and so perhaps at a minimum, KRCC or the city wants to say that we agree that certain points need to be further clarified in the written policy from PSRC. The comment deadline on this is November 8th. I believe that KRCC, I think, is meeting a few days before that, or on the 7th, so there's not a whole lot of time for us to coordinate to speak with one voice. Really, it's going to be up to, I think, Councilmember Ashby as our KRCC representative and the mayor and staff to put together something if we want to comment as a city, or if the city wants to support comments from KRCC to Puget Sound Regional Council. So if the council has any additional comments on this that they want to discuss now, I think this is our only opportunity, unless you want to have a special meeting, or perhaps one of the committees could take this up, but I'm not sure that there's a meeting scheduled between now and the deadline. So I think Councilmember Ashby and the mayor and I could use any direction that you want to offer, and then we could also just choose not to comment on this, given the short timeline. And
Would it make sense to send it to KRCC just so they could review some of these comments prior to your meeting?
That is in process, and I believe that KRCC will put together a letter and put it out in the board packet so that board members can review it and see if they want to support it.
Okay.
You know, so the question is really, do we want to support whatever KRCC comes up with, or do we feel the need to have an individual letter?
Well, I think it depends. If they're willing to put our requests into basically the form of their letter, then I think that'd be great. So that's what I'm saying, getting them this information in advance to perhaps analyze the concerns we have based on the needs of the city of Port Orchard.
I think based on the timing of the meetings, we're a bit gonna have to rely on you guys getting Nick or Beck and I your comments or concerns, and then we advocating there at KRCC.
I like what you put together here. It was, well done.
All right. Anything else on this? So
I
get
was
us,
just gonna
get us
ask
your thoughts.
what the other jurisdictions have done. Or
The
if
other
we know what the other-
jurisdictions are in the same position we are. I don't know that they've done anything. The last thing that I know, the port was having their regular meeting, and we're going to discuss the centers, because it truly, the regional centers impact Silverdale, Bremerton, and
Port of Bremerton.
the Port of Bremerton. Yeah.
So, Michael Scott is the Growth Management Policy Board representative. I'm his alternate. He's asked me to attend on his stead on November 2, and I asked him about that meeting, and he said in his response, which really didn't answer everything I'd asked for, but he said, I fully support, this is Bainbridge Island, I fully support the joint approach the county and KRCC have developed as expressed in the draft letters. I'll let well, that's essentially it.
I know Bremerton's position has been different
Correct.
than the county's, but they are not a member currently of KRCC.
And the county has signed and sent theirs in.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So it'll be, I don't know how many, there's a dozen or more of us on that board, so we'll need consensus there if KRCC is going to take a position.
Well, I think it's a bit of strength in numbers, and so I believe it's worthwhile following through on these comments.
I guess my one concern, I've spoken to the directors of the other cities, and we're all talking about what each of the cities are, how we view this, and I think the cities have generally been a little bit more supportive, at least at the staff level of the draft proposal from PSRC, but we're also relying on what we're hearing from PSRC staff in making that determination. But it's interesting because the county has already sent their letter. If the KRCC, if the majority of members go in a different direction or don't go quite as hard in the direction that the county has gone in its response, I don't know how you achieve consensus at that meeting.
Right.
More to come. Okay. We're to the mayor's report. And all of you were offered the opportunity to go to Fire Ops 101. And I'm telling you, you missed out. So Brandy's got some pictures that I was going to share. So there were 5. So we had electeds from virtually every city in the county. We had the commander of the Navy base. We had council members from other cities there. We did a search and rescue exercise, a cardiac event, a car extrication, where you cut the car up, second story rescue, and a live fire exercise. So you were broken into groups of 3, and you given fire gear, breathing apparatus. You had about 50 pounds of gear. that you were wearing. So that is me cutting the door off of a car that they'd already cut the top of it off, and they showed us how dangerous modern cars can be because of all of the devices that activate your airbags and things, and how that can injure a fire. So one of the first things they do is rip trim off and cut wires and you know, deflate the tires on the car so the car doesn't move. I think this next picture is I'm holding that 75-pound device that cuts through the steel. And then, so that was the car extrication exercise.
Called the Jaws of Life.
Jaws of Life, that's right. That one is me doing CPR, and if Ranchi scans up a little, slides the picture down, see that pair of boots? No, the other direction. That's Commissioner Wolf with his thumbs in his suspenders there watching. I'm not sure how that happened, but yeah, that's me sweating and him watching. So that was the CPR, or the cardiac event. They showed us how to use the tools that the firemen have to break down doors. You can go to the next one, Brandy. So it was quite a bit of instruction and the technique. I think in the next one, Council Member Daugs from Bremerton and she's holding that while I'm striking it with an axe to break a lock off. And there was just different techniques on how to do it.
Looks like you could have just walked around that.
Steve might have been able to. This is the search and rescue, and I volunteered to have the nozzle on the hose, and that's Councilmember Daugs following me, and we learned. I mean, the smoke-filled room, and we had to find the person that was in the fire. You drag your left hand in there, and then you find the person, and then you drag your right hand coming out so you don't lose, so you follow yourself in. And of course, then they threw us a curve when we got to the stairs and said, oh, the stairwell collapsed, you have to go up to the next floor. So we were dragging this mannequin. So this is the second floor rescue. So you got 50 pounds of gear on, go up to a second story window, and I had to break the window out. They didn't tell us that the trick was to like walrus in through the window. They didn't tell us till afterwards. So I was struggling to get in the window with the tanks and everything. That was at the end of the live fire. So I got to do a live fire exercise, and you went in there and actually they've got a container. I think it was 1,000 degrees in there, and you stay down low, and then they opened the door and you sprayed water on the ceiling and watched the fire react. And my group went last, and then somebody got to volunteer to actually put the fire out. So it was a great day. It was gosh, there's a whole bunch of it. That's my handler was Matt Million from Fire District 7, and he was there with me every step of the way. So you were paired up with a career firefighter, and giving you technique, how to put your gear on, checking your mask to make sure that everything we were doing was safe. So, and the coolest, so between each one of these steps, of course, they took you to the aid station, made sure you were hydrated, and they had volunteers taking your vitals to make sure that you weren't going to have a heart attack out there. And check in the first time, and my niece is there, who's a volunteer for Central Kitsap. So it was a fun day. So you missed out. So they do it every 7 or 8 years or so. So if you're still on the council and it comes about, I wouldn't miss it. And my computer turned off.
Well, some of us were working as hard, if not harder,
On the 100-year
on the
100-year birthday, you were serving
birthday
cake.
party for the Carlisle too.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, that's right. Okay, next item, I put a memo in your mailbox about census and, back up here. The Kitsap 911 Next Generation conversion of some addresses. Disregard that memo. There was about 800 of dwelling units in a number of apartment complexes that we thought, because of the new conversion for 911, we're going to have to readdress, and we sent a memo out. They found a solution that there's only a handful now of houses that we're going to have to readdress related to they're out of order. And so it's a big deal with CENTCOM. They want the very, very systematic about that addressing. So Census 2020 is coming, and there's a process that we need to go through, and we've done it ourselves in the past at a tune of about $4,000 or $5,000 when we were a smaller city for the address verification process. The county is offering for us to participate in their process, which I think is a fair cost to do this. They said they would do it for up to $10,000. This would be a 2019 budget request, but we need to make a commitment to the county whether we're willing to do that or not by the end of this year, and then it would be funded. We would need to make it part of our 2019 budget process. We get roughly, our money we get from the federal government is about $4,500 a household from the census process, so we want to make sure the information is accurate, and that's what it's a verification process. So it would be a challenge for us to accomplish that with the staffing levels we have right now, and I'm just looking to you that whether we should commit to the county to participate in their process, or whether or not we're going to do something in the 2019 budget and with our staffing so that we have the bandwidth to do it ourselves. So, and I would recommend partnering with the county. So is anybody questions or?
Well, I just had a comment of, is there a way that we can participate or at least be an observer of the process?
Yeah, how would we monitor the county's activity, Nick? That's a fair question.
So Doug Price, our code enforcement officer, is the point person for handling all of the census requests that we get. And essentially, he'll have direct contact with the staffer at the county. He's going to get to review the draft documents prepared for this, the draft reports. And he also apparently, because all the census data, a lot of it is confidential information about residents and who lives where, he has to sign some sort of confidentiality agreement, and that gives him permission to view all of the data and review this in conjunction with the county. So we'll have a staff person assigned to this project who will be monitoring what the county is preparing.
I think it's a great idea.
We just don't have to do the work or data enter the work, so that's the savings.
We should be plenty busy doing other things at that time.
I felt so too. So we'll commit to the county then and just make sure that becomes part of our next biennial budget to fund that. So my next item is Mr. Diener and I went to the Chamber of Commerce awards banquet on Saturday night, and we were recognized for the city of Port Orchard was recognized for 25 years of continuous support of the Chamber of Commerce, and we were given a plaque, and our picture may be in the paper, I don't know. We stood up and they took our picture with this plaque, so just wanted to share that with everybody else, and I'll hand it to the clerk at the end of the night. We had a retreat earlier in the year, and there was a number of action items at the dais tonight. I gave you the status of those items. I won't go into it in detail. Get a hold of me individually, I think, or if we need to put it on a work study or something, if we're not addressing the items to your satisfaction. I want to share, if you hadn't heard, our last, was it two planning, when was the comp plan amendments, Mr. Bond? Was that two count? What planning commission meeting was that?
Oh, that was September, yeah.
September's. So the September planning commission meeting, imagine 70 people in this room. Some of them with nooses. They were wanting to hang the planning director because he was doing something to their property. That evening, I'm told that everybody but one left here very satisfied with the answers they were given. And I had an email that I just got here last week from Heather Hiskey, wrote and said, "I apologize for this letter not being timely, but I really feel compelled to make sure that I let you know my appreciation and the kudos for the job well done. I want to call Mr. Bond out for his outstanding handling of citizens at the Planning Commission meeting on September 5th. I admire how he was able to respectfully address citizens' concern without taking their sometimes offensive remarks personally. His handling is admirable for dealing with people who have strong feelings regarding their money. I applaud and respect how he communicated with the public. So, well done, Nick. And the last item on my, we've embarked on this social media journey. So Janine gives me quarterly stats. So we have now 1,278 followers. When we posted a recent permit clerk job, so then those, Fred, you know more about this than I do. The followers then share this. So we reached for that job posting 7,900 people. 7,914 people were reached with that job posting when we put it on Facebook. When we changed the construction hours from 4/10s to 5/8s on Tremont, 7,100 people were reached. The open house, which was attended very well last night, nice job to Nick and Mark for that event last night. 6,371 people were reached through our Facebook. The fall cleanup, over 5,000. National Night Out, 4,500. And our most recent municipal judge court job posting, 3,376 people. So I think it's working. So with that, I don't have anything else, and we're to our second citizen comment period.
Are you going to do?
Department heads.
Oh, department heads. What about you guys? Okay.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we had the Bethel SR 160 Sedgwick open house last night. It was well attended. Tomorrow night at South Kitsap High School from 5 to 7.
Thursday.
Today's Tuesday. Sorry. Thursday, yes, at the high school is from 5 to 7 is the SR 16 from Tacoma Narrows to, they say State Route 3, but it's actually Loxie Egan's. That open house will be at that time. Also, we've rewritten our emergency operations center plan, our emergency management plan. I think the city of Port Orchard is probably kind of on the forefront. And if this were a competition with the other jurisdictions, I think ours is being reviewed by emergency management. We're basically done. We did receive a number of items through a grant that we purchased through emergency management. Those will all have been ordered. And the last email I received is we're about ready to actually not necessarily do an exercise, but as much as setting up our new EOC up at the Tremont Fire Station. We have everything living up there now, and so we definitely, down to phones and ham operators. So I'm hoping either at the end of this year, first part of next year, we'll set up the EOC and actually get staff familiar. We may end up doing an exercise.
So a major change there is we historically had it here at this equipment here at City Hall. The fire station was up at Fircrest, and we're quite a ways apart. The police were downstairs, and now we've got up at our former fire station, Station 31, we're all in one location, which I think is much better because this building in the big earthquake is probably going to stand, but everything around it may not, and you may not be able to get here. So I think this is a much better solution.
Right. And then I guess the last item is for those of you that were confused yesterday when you heard Santa Claus is coming to town on the chimes. You aren't Rip Van Winkle. You didn't miss anything. We were just training a Public Works employee to know how to do that at 6 p.m. on the whatever. So anyway, don't be confused. It's not Christmas yet.
Hey, Mark, at the DOT open house, will we have somebody there to talk about the 16 Bethel interchange idea for the corridor phase 2 sketch open house that they're?
The off-ramp idea.
Oh, yeah, that's that has always been a part. I'm on the technical advisory group, and that has always been something that we've talked about at the last technical advisory group meeting. I finally got tired of joking about the bridge idea and just said, I want it officially in the document. So I'll really be interested to see if that's actually made it in the document. If it isn't, I think that anybody that attends, or especially when this study goes to this strategic practical solutions design process goes to the electeds in November, I just think that the voice needs to say, why put $1 billion into Gorst when there's no reliance, redundancy, environmental concerns, pedestrian concerns, when a bridge that isn't necessarily that much more expensive is really the solution. I think it's just time to stop kind of. I know that we all reacted to the bed study back in 2008, 2009. I think it's really just time to say that really is the solution. We need to stop dancing around it.
So I'm really talking about the Bethel Highway 16 interchange idea down by LiDAR.
Well, no, that's
where I start. That's the Bellmeyer. It's Bellmeyer.
Yeah, Bellmeyer. That should be in.
Okay.
But again, remember this.
Mark just took it 2 steps beyond that.
Yeah, this is strategies that isn't necessarily going to have a list of projects. We had hoped it would, but this is the open house. Right. So I know that if you want to reinforce that concept, this is going to be run by the Department of Transportation. I'm assuming they'll have a similar activity like we had last night where you can draw on the paper. So again, the more people that throw that out there, the better. I know that an off-ramp only at Bellmeyer isn't consistent with the DOT's interchange criteria. And I was trying to think of the term last night, and it still hasn't come to me. It's like a non-compliant off-ramp or something, because they have spacing requirements. So it would be non-compliant, but I still think it's worth pursuing. And of course, this is, when you have a legislative body and a public that, push forth an agenda, it's not going to come from a staff person talking about it. It's really going to come from...
Olympia's not going to come up with that solution.
It's got
to come here locally.
It's got to come here locally, yeah.
We should tell them Gorst is not compliant.
Well,
Mark,
yes.
you know where at the high school this is going to be?
I believe it's at the there'll be plenty of signs directing. I think it's either going to be in the gym or in the commons or something.
Very quickly, Mark, the bridge you were referring to, is that a bridge off of Bay Street over the inlet? Is that what you're talking about?
It would be
where
from
Anderson Hill comes in.
It would be 16 to 3.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been conceptualized since I was a kid, growing up here. So
Talking something going off of Ross Point across.
yeah, Ross Point, or if you just come down Highway 3 and you go directly across, it'll be like the Coronado Bridge, kind of where you just curve right into 16, and then you would have the ability to get off 3 to continue on 3 south to Belfair. And I know the state doesn't want to build a bridge, but again, why would you put a lot of money into Gorst when, again, from an environmental standpoint, with climate change and rising tides and liquefaction, and it just doesn't make sense to put that kind of money into that area to correct problems when the railroad bridge trestle is always going to be an issue with the Navy train, and the Naval Base Kitsap is really reliant on trying to get commerce through there and employees, which they struggle with. And I know that transit doesn't go through there because they can't have reliability, so on their normal service route. So I guess it's just time to, I'm not an elected, but I think it's just legislatively to just really start pushing that agenda item, and because it's always kind of like the joke, don't talk about the bridge. Well, I think it's time to start talking about the bridge.
Noah?
Seeing as we're getting late in the evening, I'll keep my comments for the good of the order fairly brief. Again, I did want to mention again, November 14th will be a big meeting for us with the biennial budget amendments. I'll bring forward the property tax ordinance, and I'm also bringing forward a COLA for staff resolution, again, per your historic practices of offering that to the non-union represented employees. We've gone through the analysis to look at what the COLA change is going to be for those unionized employees, and I'll bring forward a resolution that kind of matches that for those non-union represented. The other two good the order kind of efficiency things I wanted to mention that you might be interested in is that we have decided to move away from having the mayor and the pro tem and Brandy sign checks by hand. We're going to move to electronic signatures, which is going to be a great efficiency for the city on a whole, but also it's going to save the mayor's hand from writing all those checks for AP. You've seen this.
Left-handed, I sign upside down and backwards. It's painful.
So this is just one step of many that we're going to pursue over the next couple of years as far as creating efficiencies in the city. And this is a low-hanging fruit, and I think it's going to be a great thing for everybody, staff included. The other piece I wanted to mention was that we rolled out an IT help desk last week. Again, what we want to do is capture requests through a ticketing mechanism where we can better monitor, prioritize, and track what our IT needs are for the city. So I'm very excited about rolling that out and having so far good success with the ticketing system we have in place.
Thank you. Mr. Bond.
I had one other item I needed to bring up this evening, and that has to do with a tiny home homeless housing project. The county contacted the mayor late last week and asked that we go out for a site visit to look at a proposed site where some tiny homes could be located. Currently, our regulations don't really clearly address tiny housing. At the previous site they had been looking at, we felt that it could be a conditional use permit. At this new site, which is zoned commercial, it's not as clearly allowed or not allowed. And so the county is pretty interested in getting answers from the city on this, and we, typically when somebody comes forward and wants to pursue development, we go through a pre-application process where they apply for a pre-application meeting, we get everybody in the room, and we produce a pre-application letter. In this case, we could dedicate some staff time to this, and it would be a considerable amount of time and potentially in consulting with the attorney to figure out a path forward for this, and that would be outside of our normal pre-application process. And then the third possibility here would be the county has also suggested that we maybe consider adopting a temporary use ordinance that would allow for this, a different path forward for this, which would be outside of going through any existing permitting process. And so I guess I'm looking for a council direction on what your preference would be for handling this situation, whether you want us to just sort of more collaboratively work with the county on this, which could take considerable amounts of time, and skip the normal pre-application process, whether we should tell the county to apply for a pre-application meeting for their proposed project, or whether you'd be interested in putting staff resources into developing code specifically to allow like a tiny house type of project. And
so the site that I was in interviews Friday, so we did send Stephanie from the planning department with it. It is not a residential area. It's up behind the Pancake House. Someone has a piece of property that they're willing to allow the county to use for this for a few years, not permanently, and it is adjacent to the impound yard for a towing facility. So there really isn't. We shouldn't have the outcrying that we had, not in my neighborhood, because it really isn't. It isn't a resident.
There aren't any neighbors there, are there?
No, it's the
Yeah.
backs
There's
to
one
the
house.
Blackjack Creek on the backside. It would abut the towing facility on one side, and I think the access is pretty close to the Pancake House there on Bethel.
And it's pretty flat, and it's got utilities except for sewer, so it makes sense in many ways.
Yeah.
There's a house there though, right? They could use the house as the services.
I don't think the house
I think
is-
that's on the adjacent property, and I think it's empty.
Okay.
What's the size of the parcel?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I think it's an acre or two,
Oh,
but it goes down into the ravine, and so I'm not sure how much of it is flat versus how much of it is just down the hill.
My view is that a pre-app application makes sense, that we would treat this like anybody else who wanted to come in. And the county, I think, would best operate with that kind of an approach.
Okay. Mr.
That's
Foster?
just my opinion.
Okay.
Well, I was certainly open to just having the staff take a look at it. I think it's something we all should be a part of and look at, and whether we should, make the county jump through hoops for something that could benefit Port Orchard. But
We
Council
were
wants to
leaning
do
towards just having a less formal
yeah,
meeting with the county staff. But-
That's fine. I mean, I thought I heard that the other approaches were gonna be more time consuming, and so that was my concern.
Well, I think the challenge of having a less formal process is that when we do a pre-application meeting, we have a more specific proposal because the applicant has supplied some drawings or some level of detail about their proposal, and then we can respond in accordance with that level of detail. Right now, we're at such a conceptual phase that it's really difficult to figure out sort of what parameters we're working with and how to respond at such a high level.
And I'll just say that I've been part of the county's committee on this, and they've been going around and around and looking for sites, and they're not pinning themselves down very well, and I think this is the opportunity for them to do that.
So is this one of the only sites? Are we the first to, is this the first site?
This has been Commissioner Garrido's mission to cite one.
Countywide, is that what you're asking?
Three of them, one in the south, one in the central, and one in the north. And she would like, it's been her initiative, as she's the South End Commissioner. She's got 11 of the 12, if not 12 of the 12, tiny homes built to deploy. So it is her desire to.
There's another site in Central behind Fred Meyer's over by the Illahee Preserve that they're talking about as well.
Off of Elmira.
I can remember that in a committee discussion that Port Orchard, the position of Port Orchard was to not be the only one offering this in the county. So that I think the timing of those other sites being available and opened up is pretty important. So that we're not just the only site, because it could be who knows how long. And I do remember that we talked about that.
It's been discussed at Housing Kitsap, the Elmira site. There are other sites moving forward, but they need to deploy build the 12, deploy them, and then they'll work with the faith-based organizations to build 12 more. You're seeing them scattered around, around the county.
Many of the houses built were by organizations that are from South Kitsap. There's been a great outpouring amongst the South Kitsap churches and organizations. So I'd say probably 10 of the 12, and I thought there were actually 15, were funded by people just hearing about it and wanting to write a check for $2,000. Tim Blair, a local South Kitsap entity, or pastor actually, has been spearheading this part of it. But I agree with Cindy that it is something that we want to make sure it's not the only one in the county. I think that we may also want to make sure that we have a citizen on the application committee for who they put in the village. This may be a request. From what I heard from Nick, it sounded like there were two courses. One would be more time intensive. I'm interested in the one that would require less staff time, whether it's the permit one or the temporary ordinance.
I just think if you want the county to commit, then the pre-application is going to.
I think the only reason we're asking the question is because we're getting questions from the commissioner's office staff that they're wanting answers yesterday as opposed to.
How do we move forward? And we're going, well, our code doesn't allow it, and there's a council meeting tonight who's going to reach out. So it sounds like step one is we still don't even fully understand what the request is, so to require a yeah. So I think at the staff level, I think Nick and Commissioner Garrido's staff need to sit down and identify really what the request is, and then figure out how we can move forward.
Because it
I
does.
guess I looked at it from a different approach and not necessarily waiting to figure out what it is they want, but a more of a collaborative effort between the city and the county as to what we collectively want to see.
Okay.
And what a project would look like, and not necessarily wait for them to tell us something that we can correct or change or whatever. Just do it collaboratively.
But we definitely, what I'm hearing is that we're going to need to make some changes to our code. So we want to be very clear on what we're doing and how we're moving forward. So I agree with Councilman Clausen that I would like us to work with this collaboratively. But we also need to make sure that we're covering the best interest of Port Orchard as we move forward.
Absolutely.
Well,
And I
we-
think those are the types of things that we could, you know, if you could just change this concept a little bit, we wouldn't have to change our regulation. Or if you really think it's important, then we will have to change. And that's the type of dialogue that I think should go on.
Right. Well, we often have informal, we have our actual pre-apps, but usually when you get to a pre-app, the developer or the applicant has a very clear project in mind. We have pre-apps at times, which is an informal pre-app where we don't have to issue a letter. And if we go through that process, it just needs to be very clear from our staff that we're really going to be asking a lot of questions so that we can ultimately answer questions, because what we have right now is it's pretty loose. And so to get to the actual pre-app, we're going to have to, the county's going to have to come with more solid plan. And that's what I guess we could work out on a pre-app.
I guess I see this as more than just questions. This is more of our questions, but also we giving direction.
Right, we need to, there are all sorts of categories of, frontage improvements and utilities and operation and code enforcement and who's doing what, that we'll be asking the county when they come to a pre-app to have the answers to those things, because, there are a lot of questions right now.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have enough nebulous direction?
I want to make a comment to Nick. Nick, was Doug Price or the city involved at all? And I don't know if the rest of the council knows this, but there's been a derelict, what I considered a derelict building on Mitchell, at the bottom of Mitchell, behind the dentist office. It's gone.
The old Duck Miner house?
I don't know
The
if
house
it
is
was-
gone?
Yes, and there's just the foundation there. It came down this week, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, well,
And I just wanted to acknowledge that. I didn't know whether Doug had made that happen or whether the property owner did it on their own.
I remember Doug telling me that a project was, or that a building was coming down. I don't remember which one it was,
Of course
but
it was Doug.
I think
Well, it
that's
was
been
on our
his radar.
list, and that he was working. It wasn't anything that we went to court on, like the one on Canyon Lane. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, it is. But now we have a big hole there, but
that's supposed to be a project.
that's right.
Rain, well, the rain, with all the rain, now we have a swimming pool. We have a community pool. Not heated.
It's a wonderful thing.
Okay. Sharon, what do you have for us?
I do not have anything for you this evening.
You have a whole bunch of code coming is what you have.
That is true, and the ones that were on the agenda tonight were the ones that were a little meatier, and some of the ones that are coming next are not quite so robust.
Okay. Randy? Nothing. Okay, so now we're to citizen comments. Yes, Jerry?
Thank you for explaining a little bit more. I was wondering about, there's a speed sign going outside of town, and it's hidden in, I think the plant is bamboo, but you can't see it until you're almost next to it. And I was wondering how difficult it is. I don't know the rules on, speed limit signs.
The best way to capture that so that Mark doesn't forget tomorrow morning is the Public Works complaint log. And you
Oh,
can
well, I really wasn't complaining. I just think that.
But we need to know, if that's how we capture it, and so
Okay.
that it makes it on the work roster, because they have a meeting once a week, and they take all those in the meeting, and they divvy up the work, and it'll definitely, we need to take care of those things.
Well, I was just thinking, I would assume that the bamboo is to cut the noise from the road. I would hate to see the bamboo cut for that sign, but if the sign could either be moved closer to the yacht club or beyond their home, that would be a solution, but I don't know your
Yeah,
rules.
we have somebody in our, Public Works that actually, many times the signs are put at specific distances from driveways and so on and so forth, but you can
Yeah.
make it as a suggestion when you make so call the Public Works or email the Public Works Department, and they will gladly go out and take a look at that. So thanks for.
I would say the moving of a sign would not be the route. We would cut the vegetation back enough to see the sign. We do that all the time. We're constantly
that.
cutting back. So we have to meet the manual of uniform traffic control device standards. So
It's just, I've noticed it all summer long, but haven't had the brain cells to remember to bring it up, so. Anyway, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, we're gonna go into, I know Brandy said 20 minutes. I'm hoping with 10 minutes, Nick? Can we do it in 10 minutes, the executive session? Well, okay, 15-minute executive session is what I'm hearing. And pursuant to RCW 4030.110, it is potential litigation is the subject.